Welcome to Clicks and Bricks Podcast. We talk about the entrepreneur mindset.
If you get one shot at this, what kind of shot are you going to take?
If we forget who we are, they're going to forget who you are.
You've got an adversity story that's out of this world.
Everything from that Main Street brick and mortar to that billion-dollar manufacturer.
Welcome back to Clicks and Bricks. Today I'm talking with Joel Friedland from Brit Properties. Joel, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Ken. It's great to see you.
Wonderful having you today. I'm excited to talk to you about real estate. We don't talk about real estate a whole lot, but we're also going to talk about debt and finance and all kinds of other fun things. But before we jump into that, Joel, do you mind telling the audience a little about who you are and what is it that Brit Properties does?
Sure. I am a syndicator, an industrial real estate syndicator. And we can get into what industrial is and what a syndicator is. And specifically, what I do is I find industrial buildings, primarily small ones that are under $3 million. And then I get together a group of investors who are like-minded with me, and we each put a certain amount of money in, like $50,000 or $100,000. And then we buy that $3 million building, all cash, no debt, no bank. It's really unusual. There's nobody else that we've found in the entire country who does this. And it's probably because we're stupid to be doing it. Because when you use leverage, you make a lot more money if the deal works. But if you don't use leverage and the deal doesn't work, you lose a lot less money while you're building assets. So right now, I've got about 100 active investors that are from all walks of life. They are lawyers, doctors, dentists, people who've just sold their company, retired people. And what they do is they listen to my pitch, which is a very simple pitch, which is I'm a little bit like Dave Ramsey, who I like to watch every now and then, who believes in no debt and not getting in trouble and not putting yourself under the kind of pressure that gives you a mental breakdown. And I can tell you one of the things that for me made me this way, because I've not always been a debt-free guy. In the 1980s, I was a kid right out of college. I went to work for a family that owned 80 industrial buildings, and they mentored me for 10 years. They took a lot of risk, and they lost money on deals. They also made a lot of money on deals. But from that time, I've been through 4 down cycles, and I have been through the pain of having a bank tell me that they were going to take me down and put me into bankruptcy.
But one bank can't do it alone. They need 3 generally.
Well, I had 7.
Okay.
I had 7.
That's rough.
It was really rough, man. I had built up my portfolio to be in the ballpark of about $200 million. And our equity on the $200 million compared to the debt, our equity was about $70 million and our debt was $130 million. And my partner and I guaranteed all the loans at 7 banks. And when 2008 hit,
and you didn't write member next to your name, did you?
I got to tell you, I went into this really deep depression. Yeah. I was in a state of literally not kidding, not knowing if I wanted to live because I thought I had been really successful, high flying. My partner and I were making 7-figure incomes in the early 2000s. We bought big houses. He bought a BMW. I got a GMC Yukon XL, the big long one. Put a big addition on the house, did all the kinds of things that rich people do. Yep. And then in 2008, my 4th downturn, it was nothing like the other ones. And I was facing having to sell the house, having to go bankrupt, having to tell my hundreds of investors that they lost all their money. And then I went to work. And when you're in a depression, I had meditation, I had medication, I had counseling. My parents used to come over just to soothe me and make me feel better. My wife was scared shitless because we were in deep trouble. We thought we were rich and we became very poor very fast.
Done that a couple times myself in life.
Yeah. And when you're younger, like you, I'm 66.
Yeah.
When you get to my stage in the game, the last thing you want to do is lose your money that hopefully is there for your future. Whether I'm never going to retire, but at least to give you more freedom. And I felt like I was going to have to start over when I was 50, and it was real. It was just so much pain.
Money does not buy happiness, but it sure as hell buys convenience.
Yeah.
There's a couple things that you talked about here It's a lot to unpack. It's a ton to unpack. I want to talk about the mental breakdown for a second. I've had a bank call a $2.5 million note on me, and it is one of the scarier things on the planet, right? And then have them telling you, hey, you're going to have to file bankruptcy and walk away from this business. I can't imagine that, because I've been very close to that. I've had banks say, hey, you should file bankruptcy. And I was just too stubborn to do it and didn't, and figured it out a way. You're no debt, no bank, and Dave Ramsey's approach. Now, for those of you who don't know Dave Ramsey, it's pay off all your debt, don't have any debt. That's his. You can go to YouTube or buy his courses. There's a lot. It goes a lot deeper than that. But I've always lived my life that as long as I can liquidate my assets for more than I owe, and I kind of go like a 50% rule, right? So if I can liquidate all my assets and pay off my debt and still have half my value left, that I'm pretty good. I do that because I like to keep my bank powder dry.
Yeah.
But you're saying don't use the bank at all. Is there any kind of concept there to use that? Because right now we're at a time that if you can invest, you should be looking at where you should be investing right now. There's a ton of opportunities. A lot of people are going to lose their ass, but a lot of people are going to be billionaires over the next 5 years.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. One of the things that I like to say to everybody who I talk to about my no debt strategy is it's a strategy. It's my strategy. It works for me. I don't recommend that anybody else do a debt-free strategy. It's not something, I'm not like a zealot, I'm not like an evangelist for being debt-free like Dave Ramsey. I'm just saying for someone's little corner of their portfolio. First of all, I believe that nobody should ever have more than 3% of their net worth in any particular investment. Now, that's hard to do because some people bought a lot of Apple stock and got rich and they haven't sold it. So maybe they bought it for $300,000 and today it's worth $7 million and their total net worth might be $10 million. So they've got 70% of their money in one stock. I don't believe in that. I think I have a friend who once bought one stock and it went from being worth tens of millions to being worth zero because he wasn't diversified enough. So I tell my investors, my family, I'm not recommending that you put all your money in debt-free stuff. I'm simply saying if you invest with me, that little corner of your portfolio is going to be super safe. There's just, and when I got in all my trouble, I worked very hard to get out of trouble. I worked incredibly hard to not have all that debt anymore and not to be at risk and not to be in a mental health crisis. That's just what my philosophy was. Let's just stay out of trouble. And it's not so easy to stay out of trouble because there's some action element to investing and wanting to make a lot more than what I pay, which is a cash flow distribution of about 8% of what someone puts into a deal. But it's hard.
Like to look for what I call low risk, high reward scenarios. This is what I look for. I very seldomly find them.
Yeah.
Right. I think crypto is one of those things, right? Bitcoin specifically. There's a lot of high risk stuff, and even crypto is still super high risk. But I think today it's becoming more and more less risky.
Well, I'm getting back to that diversification thing. You'd have to be crazy to put all your money in Bitcoin. You'd have to be out of your mind, right?
I have too much for sure.
Okay. Well, so you've got some risk, but you're 50 and I'm 66, right? You can take that risk. I cannot take the same amount of risk. So for me, for a retired dentist, for a guy who sold his business and has a $10 million net worth and wants to continue to have a second home in Florida or in Arizona, I need to be in a position where if I lose my entire investment in something, okay, it feels bad, but I'm not going to be having to sell my house and not having to go into a psychiatrist's office to get new depression medicine.
I would argue that the more times you go through this, the better you get at it, and the confident that that you'll be able to move these levers around and get through it. And with your particular scenario, I can see a huge amount of benefits. Let's just walk through an average deal for you. You're going to buy a small industrial building in Chicago. What does that small industrial building in Chicago, what does that mean?
Okay, I'll give you a really good example of one that we own, that we bought. There's a building in Chicago. It's 33,000 square feet, which is, roughly 10 times larger than a big house. And in the front, it's got some office. It's got 2 loading docks for trucks to deliver their raw materials and take away their finished product. And inside the building is a manufacturing company that's called Steiner Industries, and they make safety products for the welding industry. It's a very specific niche.
Okay.
It was started by a guy by the name of Bob Steiner. He started it in the 1970s. Today, he's 91 years old. And he built this business up and eventually moved into this building, which is on Tripp Avenue in Chicago, which, by the way, is the street that Walt Disney was born on in Chicago.
Wow.
Not in the same block, because these are all industrial buildings. But it's a box. It's just a box where inside 60 people are manufacturing products. So you picture a welder, you know how they have those screens?
Yeah.
So those colored screens that are built in frames. So those are there so that the sparks don't catch fire to something outside of the little workspace where the welder's working. But also they're there because you're not supposed to look directly into the flame when someone's welding because it hurts something inside your eye. And so they make these screens there. They also make gloves that are used by welders. Anything that, if you went to a welding shop, anything that's a safety product, Steiner makes it. So Steiner got bought out by a company called Bunzl, which is on the London Stock Exchange. I don't know what Bob Steiner got. It's some number of millions. He lives a nice lifestyle with a $1 million condo in Florida and $1 million condo in Chicago. He sold the business and he got this money and he still owned the building because he had originally bought the building for the business. Now he doesn't own the business and he's just getting rent. And I know him and he knows that I buy buildings. And he said, Joel, would you buy my building? And it was 2021. I said, yeah, house 2.4 million. He said, I'll take it. My guess is he paid $1 million too. So he's doubling his money. And I went out and I got investors to put up the $2.5 million-ish with no mortgage. And we bought it with an 8% annual yield with the rent going up every year. So the next year it's 8.2, and after that 8.4, and after that 8.6. Steiner bought it in the 1980s and owned it for 30 years. And we bought it 4 years ago, and we are long-term holders, and we're going to own it until the day I die and my young partner takes over.
Nice.
And by then, the cash flow ought to be around 12 or 15%, but also the value of the building theoretically goes up. Right. So we bought it. We're into this. We bought it for $2.4 million, and a local comparable sale was about $3.5 million. So just in the period we've owned it, it's gone up about $1 million, which means if you take $1 million and you look at what that is compared to the $2.5 million we paid, it's a 40% increase in 4 years. It's gone up 10% a year, and we're making 8%. So we're making 18%. Now that's a good story.
Yeah.
One more thing. If any investor ever wants to get out, I go to the other investors. I say, who wants to buy this person out? And for a certain yield, I can get someone out in a week. But that's how we can own long-term and not have to sell the building.
Beautiful.
Okay. But if I told you my worst story, we bought the old RC Cola plant in the city of Chicago, and it was 300,000 square feet on 11 acres. We were in there for $2.5 million in 2008. We lost all of it. So if someone put $100,000 in, they lost $100,000. We had a lot of
the property.
What's that?
Didn't even have the property to sell.
No, we gave it back to the bank.
Walked away.
So it's really an exciting business when things work, and it's disastrous business when things don't work. And having done this for 43 years, I'm pretty good at picking the good buildings, and I'm pretty good at keeping the risk down by not having the debt. And if I was 50 years old like you, I'd still have debt. But I'm 66, and my investors have this little corner of their portfolio in this really safe space.
So we're talking small batch manufacturing, multi-tenant buildings, anything over 6,000 square feet that has an industrial use.
And under 30,000 square feet.
Under 30,000.
Yeah. I believe that the bigger the building, the more risk you have because there are fewer tenants and buyers with the larger sizes. There are many more industrial companies, which is these family-owned industrial companies are like the backbone of the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
Those
And
are our
they're-
tenants.
and they're in trouble. Way off on a tangent, just because this falls into my world very, very specifically at this time at this specific time in our universe is the only way that I can really think about saying it. Have you been following the data center builds in this country or on the planet lately? And what do you think?
Yeah. In fact, I could show you a picture of the building we bought last week, the satellite view in an industrial park called in Wooddale, Illinois, near O'Hare Airport. We bought a 26,000 foot building.
Okay.
There's 202 buildings in the industrial park, 9.2 million square feet. And what I did is I had a group of summer interns last year, and we went to Wooddale and we divided up the 202 buildings into 50 building quadrants. And the young interns went door to door asking, "Hey, will you sell your building?" And we found this one. One of the young guys in my office found it. And just by being relentless with the seller, trying to get him to sell, even though he wasn't really interested in the beginning. And if you go to the backyard of the industrial building and you look out over what's there, it's a 70-acre site where Cyrus One is building a 4-building, $1.5 billion data center. And that's our next door neighbor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're gonna have some problems.
Yeah.
You're gonna be fighting for electricity.
Well, luckily, that's why they're there. Because in Chicago, some of the advantages of industrial in Chicago are it's where all the highways meet. It's where the airport's really easy to access. It's where all the rail cars meet in the center of the country.
Yeah.
St. Louis, you don't have exactly the same kind of infrastructure that we've got. It's good.
We're missing the rail for sure.
Yeah. And we've got Lake Michigan for the freshest water in the world, and it's an unlimited supply. So food companies love it here. But we also we're very high on electricity on the grid, which is why we are the third largest data center location in the country. I think it's after Virginia and Dallas. Chicago's third.
Yeah. I'm opposed to the 500 meg data centers. I think it's a bad thing. I'm an owner operator of a data center in St. Louis. I've operated the largest data center in St. Louis for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
I think 25 meg data centers spread out instead of the big megas is a much better approach, but that's a whole nother episode conversation and everything else. So,
yeah. We have dozens of data centers here, and the big ones are really, really big, including the one next door to our new building.
Yeah. And it's, we'll see what happens. It's a wild time right now. Reminiscent to me of when the government came in and broke up Southwestern Bell as a monopoly, and all the CLECs were running to build telecom data centers in the 90s. I feel like we're doing the same thing now.
One other thing that's really interesting about the site next to us, the Cyrus One site, is there were 70 homes on that site 3 years ago. And the developer came in and made offers to all 70 and bought all 70 and knocked down the homes. So they destroyed a neighborhood. Although the homeowners did great. If someone had a house that was worth $400,000, they got $800,000.
It's a new day. They did way better than the people that lived at the bottom of the Hoover Dam.
Exactly.
Way better.
Exactly.
Joel,
yes.
you've become known for debt-free industrial syndications.
Yeah.
What finally pushed you to go all cash, and what numbers convinced you it scales?
Okay. I had bought already through 2008, 87 buildings, all with debt. And when I got into trouble in 2008, I had 50 left and 10 were in real trouble. And that's when I had to get to work to save the portfolio from going bankrupt. And that's when I had the mental health crisis where I really didn't know if I could live through it. No joke. And it was so difficult. While I was trying to save the portfolio, and did, from 2000, I went back to my original job. I had built up an industrial real estate brokerage company called Epic Savage. You ever watch The Wonder Years, that TV show?
Yeah.
My partner was the dad of the kid on that show. So Epic were the initials of my grandparents, and Savage was my partner. And we built up with other partners, including 2 of my brothers, a business where we had 40 brokers in 2004 and 2008. I was lucky that I could be a broker and make a good living because I was unable to pull the trigger on buying any buildings anymore. So I became a broker. Brokers in my industry, industrial brokers who have been in the business for a while, there's a group called SIOR, the Society of Industrial and Office Realtors. And I would say the average broker, there's about 3,000 members, makes more than $1 million a year brokering because they're making these big deals like with Amazon and with Target's warehouse and with manufacturers who make all kinds of new kinds of cars and batteries and all that stuff. I became a broker because I couldn't buy buildings. I was constrained. My investors were worried about whether they'd get their money back. So I'd have to start over again. So I became a broker again. And then we sold the brokerage company to a group out of Houston called Transwestern. So we had what's called a liquidity event. We made a 7-figure sale on our business that we had built up. And it still wasn't enough for me to live on. So I kept brokering. And then I said, I want to get back into buying assets. I agree with you. You got to buy assets. You got to have assets. You can't just be a service provider your whole life without ending up with nothing.
And I think we have to reconsider what assets are in a digital world.
Yes, I agree with that. So in 2019, I decided to get back into syndicating and buying. I'd taken a very long break. And in 2019, I decided, I don't know if you like Seth Godin, but Seth Godin talks about strategy more than anything. And I decided my new strategy was going to be safety first to an extreme. He wrote a book called The Purple Cow.
Yeah.
And if you were
Great
driving
book.
along on a country road and you saw brown cows and you saw white cows and spotted cows and black cows, and then you're driving by and all of a sudden you see a purple cow, that's remarkable. So you would pull over and take a picture and you'd show it to everyone and you'd remark on it. Remarkable, he says, means it's worth remarking on. So I decided for my own financial safety and mental health to do nothing with debt. That was my new strategy in 2019. And that's why it happened, because of the pain of what had happened before. And what's interesting about it is debt-free industrial real estate is a purple cow. Nobody else does it. It's not available anywhere else. People don't take a picture of me and say, hey, here's Joel the purple cow, but they say to their brother or their mother, you should invest with this guy if you want some safe stuff. That's why it happened.
Yeah, I love the purple cow, blue ocean, red ocean stuff. The only thing that's better than better is being different across the board. I could not agree with you more. And no debt real estate is different. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why. I don't think we should go into that about tax liability, like all kinds of stuff.
Right.
But
we could talk chapter and verse about what's good about it and what's bad about it.
yeah, and I think there's there's both sides of it. Like the risk, if you don't have a high risk tolerance, you should not be in business. Like you should get a job.
Or you need to be in a business where you have some level of mitigation of risk that's an extreme level of it. I'll give you one very, very sad case, okay? Really sad case. A good friend of mine built up a gigantic portfolio with tons and tons of debt. He built a $3.5 million house. He had a second home in Florida. He had a bunch of kids. He had a bunch of grandkids. He was the age that I am now back in 2008 when things went bad. And he ended up having to sell everything. And he ended up starting over at 66. And I said to him this, I said, you know what you should be doing? I'll use a fake name in case he's watching this. John, what you should be doing, it's not John. What you should be doing is you should be going to Gamblers Anonymous meetings, because what you really did is you gambled heavily in business. There's a very big difference in my mind between investing and gambling. Investing is either impulsive or it's with gambling is either impulsive or with a really stupid strategy. And the only way to not have a stupid strategy is to have advisors and be honest with them.
Yeah.
You can't. My partner used to say, I don't need any advisors. I know what I want to do right here. I got it. I trust my gut.
That's not where his gut is, though.
Right. There may be some billionaires who trust their gut, but I think most really prudent investors have advisors.
Yeah, and I also think it's important for people to know in entrepreneurship, there's a difference between an investor and a creator. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a creator. I'm not an investor. I build my own things and I try to sell them.
Yeah.
I build thousands of things and I sell very few of them. Right. Some of them, I've got $100 million in this online sales under my belt in my time on this planet. And I don't plan on quitting anytime soon, but to understand that, like, that's, most of my sales are 3 products.
But I'm going to guess that you know those products better than anyone else.
I would say I know cold out containment on a slab floor better than anybody on the planet. And I know liquid immersion better than most people on the planet.
So you're not gambling, because if you have a laser focus on something where you're the expert and your value creation is because of your knowledge, again, getting back to Seth Godin, he says the key thing that you have to do is you have to be passionate about something that you're going to be better at than anyone else anywhere. And that leads to success every time. And I'll give you an example. My wife.
And I would disagree with Seth and take away that second part. The only thing you have to do is be passionate and move.
Okay. But I'm going to say that that's not something that I agree with. And let me tell you why.
I'm okay with that.
Okay. Yeah. My wife was diagnosed. We went on a trip to Africa last year with her sister and her sister's boyfriend. We did a safari. It was her bucket list trip of a lifetime. And we got back and she was having some really weird symptoms. And she ended up being diagnosed with pancreas cancer, which is lethal 87% of the time. So we went into action to find an oncologist and a surgeon who would be the best in the country. I don't want someone who's just passionate about being a doctor. I want someone who's the best.
Yep.
I'm not going to pick the second best. We went and interviewed 5 doctors at 5 hospitals. We ended up out of state in Wisconsin, but it's only an hour drive from our home in Deerfield, Illinois, near Chicago. But we found this Doug Evans, who is so highly regarded, and he's the head of a group. There's a charity that's a group of people who are very interested in, they're passionate about solving and living with pancreas cancer. And we chose Doug Evans because he is not only passionate, which he is, but he's one of the top, let's call it 20 out of 5,000 surgeons who've ever done surgery in the world on pancreas cancer and done what's called the Whipple procedure. And his team, the oncologist and the lady that does the radiology, it's they zap the cancer. So we picked Doug and his team because he at the top of his game in that field. So I look at it the same way. I want to be the number one in the country, not number 2, number 1. And this is what Seth Godin says: small, freestanding, industrial building, buyer and syndicator above everybody else, and know more about it than anybody else, and be passionate about it. But that's my comparison. That's my.
Yeah, I agree with you. But if you weren't passionate, it would all go to hell. I would rather have number 5 that's passionate if the top 4 aren't passionate about what they're doing.
Doug Evans is so passionate about it that when we first met him, he gave us his cell phone number and he said, call day or night. This is what I do. I live to help people with pancreas cancer. And we use that. We had a couple emergencies during her treatment and we did call him. He picked up right away and went right into action. He is so passionate about it. He speaks all over the world about it. He loves getting new patients and explaining things. So you're totally right. If he didn't have the passion, he wouldn't be the best in the world.
If you don't have the passion for it, I would rather be broke doing something I'm passionate doing than be rich doing something that kills my soul.
Fully agree.
It's just not there.
Fully agree, yes.
It has to be there for you. If you want to, I think you can be successful otherwise, but then you have to define what success is. And it's not just being rich. That's not it.
No, you're totally right. You know, success to me is being able to go buy some plants to work in my garden. And I mean, you know, everybody has their own thing. To me, if I have the freedom, if I was to take my phone and show you what I've done around my house, I am passionate about that. I love that. But making a good living allows me, being really good at industrial real estate allows me to be really passionate. I think people who are passionate about one thing are passionate about a lot of things. I think that defines you from what I've seen on your.
I work 15 hours a day because I choose to. I work 3 different jobs. I do the data center Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. I do the gym on the nights and the weekends until about 8 o'clock. And then I'm at the nightclubs, at the comedy clubs until about 10 or 11 o'clock at night, almost every single day. But at any time, if I don't want to do that day, I don't have to.
Yeah.
I can just stay home. I can sit in the hot tub all day if I wanted to, but that gets boring after about an hour.
Yeah.
Right? I'm going to go out.
You know what gets boring to me? Golf.
Yeah.
I love playing once in a while, but these people who make a career of it and play every single day, not professionals, but people who retire and go play golf.
Yeah.
I couldn't do it.
It's crazy. And on nights that I don't go to the club, I'm at the basketball court just shooting hoops until 10 or 11 o'clock at night just to get rid of the energy so I can so that hopefully I can sleep.
Well, you're a doer. There are people who are doers, then there are people who are thinkers. They think about doing and they don't do it.
But yeah, I do it to stop myself from thinking because that's a dangerous.
It is.
Walk us through a capital raise system. How do you attract, educate, and retain accredited investors who prefer sleep at night income?
Okay, that's a great question. I struggle with that, actually. I only have 250 investors in my entire group. And of those, many are from years ago and have not invested lately. I call them my hibernators, right? They haven't invested lately. So I really only have about 100 active investors. And to me, I believe that having a smaller group where I know people very, very well, I know their goals and I know their estate plans, and I want to know who their families are in case something happens to them, because they're going to call me the next day and say, something happened to Dad. He's in a coma. What have we got with you? I want that call to be from someone who I already have a note in my file of who they are and what the dad said about them, because that's what life does. It takes twists and turns. So I add a few investors every month. When I say a few, 2 to 3, that's all. I'm not looking to have 1,000 investors who I don't know, because to me, the sense of community is more important than anything in the world. It's relationships that matter. The real estate is I love butter, and I'll put butter on anything. The butter is what matters to me, whether it's on bread or a pretzel or a waffle. It's the butter, right? And all I'm doing is I'm figuring out where my butter is going to be, how I'm going to enjoy my butter. To me, the investors are like butter. The buildings are like the bread. They've got to have something to eat, but the relationships are far more important. And if someone has a $10 million net worth and they've got 300,000 or 400,000 with me, my goal is for them to have $1 million with me. That's 10% of their 10 million, but it should be spread around in more than one deal, because I still believe that nobody should have more than 3% in any one deal. So I might have an investor with 8 investments with me of 100,000 each. To me, that's everything.
I want to talk about this number, 250 investors total and 100 active, because I think this is so important for a 25-year-old kid today. Right? I currently run 2 different businesses, and they're financially separated very far, but by customer count, one of them has 500 customers, one of them has 1,500 customers, right? So it's only triple the number of customers, but the revenue is way, way higher. These kids today think that they need these audiences of 1 million people or hundreds of thousands of people. And, I'm trying to get through to people that you can make a really good living with a group of 1,000 people that truly follow you, that you can create services and products for. And you have those relationships with. You can make a lot of money. I mean, you're making a decent living with an audience of 250 people.
Yeah, and I'd rather have a group that I am indispensable to of 20 people than a group of 1,000 people that I'm totally dispensable to.
You're also the guy that they come after with pitchforks, but when it goes the other way.
Well, that's why it's no debt. It doesn't go the other way.
There's no risk of it going to zero other than, the insurance is going to pay out, right? So it would be catastrophic global event to go to zero, and then nobody cares anyway.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So what does great tenant due diligence look like for you beyond credit checks and tax returns?
So the number one thing, I just went and met a new tenant, and I'm going to give you the name of the tenant. If anyone wants to look them up, it is the most spectacular operation. We have some not-for-profits in our industrial buildings. I love not-for-profits that have a big budget. We have one group that's called Feed My Starving Children. I think they have 7 facilities around the country. I think they might have one in St. Louis, but they have a facility. It's 20,000 feet. Church and school groups come and they pack food in the warehouse that is then sent overseas to starving children. They raise about $100 million a year, and their rent is probably the smallest component of all of their costs. And it's just heartwarming that they do this. And whenever I mention it to someone in the Chicago area in particular, where we have three of these Feed My Starving Children facilities, people say, oh yeah, I went and packed there with my church, or I went and packed there with my kids. And
great.
so before we made the deal, I went and saw their other operation. And then we also have another tenant. It's called Digs with Dignity. People donate furniture, they clean it up, and on Friday at 11 o'clock until Friday evening, the family that can't afford to furnish their place, but that's really deserving, Digs goes in and they furnish everything. When the people come home, there's art on the walls, there's pots and pans in the kitchen, there's plates and cups, couches, tables, chairs, beds, everything. And it's the most heartwarming thing also. They only raise $1.2 million a year right now, but their rent with us is only $200,000. And I met the founders of this group. They're Jan and Kim. They're amazing. And they were covered on a news show in Chicago. If you watch it, you see the inside of their current warehouse, which is all jammed up.
Yeah.
You need more space, which is great. That means they're doing a good job. But if it's a for-profit company, I want to know, the first thing is, how many customers do you have? You know, when you said you got 500 or 1,500, if someone's got 3 customers and one is 60% of their business, I won't take them as a tenant, because if they lose that big customer, they're out of business. So number one question is, how many customers do you have, and what's the largest single customer in terms of percentage? That's the answer.
Yeah, it's a tough one whenever you have, and there's some companies that have just one customer, right? Like, a lot of them.
Good. It's not good.
When you evaluate a small Class B industrial deal in Chicago, what 3 non-obvious signals tell you that it's a buy now versus a walk away?
It's all about the geometry of the building, always, no matter what year it is or what month it is or what the economy is doing. I have to have 3 things when I buy a building, and they're all geometry. Number 1, parking, parking, parking. If you don't have enough parking spaces on site, you can't have all the employees you want to have, because there's nowhere for them to park. So then they have to move because they can't accommodate their employee parking.
Or client parking.
Or client, right. Or visitor parking.
If you cannot reach your occupancy permit because you don't have enough spots up front, that's a bad place to be.
Well, most places, if it's built, you're grandfathered in. But the value of the building, if the tenant ever leaves, how do you get a new tenant? If a 20,000 foot building needs 30 employees, and that's sort of the ratio, 1.5 people per 1,000 square feet, you've got to have 30 car parking for the 20,000 feet. If you've got 15 car parking, who's going to lease it? These buildings are full of people who work. They're not full of machines that do things by themselves. Industrial buildings always need people. Yeah. They need people to work the forklift trucks and do the picking and packing, even if there's a robot.
Today,
robots are not going to take over for people running the CNC machines. CNC machines have already put at least 5 people out of jobs for one person that works the CNC. But somebody has to translate what the engineers do to create the product to make the customer happy. So there have to be employees in these buildings. It will never be all automated.
I'll debate that with you in a different episode.
Okay. Well, then I'll need less parking. I
don't think there's a job on the planet that a robot can't do.
Well, I agree. But in an industrial building, there's an element of judgment that a robot, once they have the judgment and they can make decisions and talk to customers and have a personal relationship with them.
They're doing it now.
What's that?
They're doing it now.
Okay. Not in my world. Not in the business of.
Yeah.
I'll give you.
It's 10 years from now, but yeah, I mean, right now, most humans today are talking with an AI and don't know it.
I understand, but if you drive by an Amazon facility, no matter how automated it is, if it's a 300,000 square foot building, they have to have 600 parking spaces.
Absolutely, today they do.
Even with every single automated trick that you can put in place, it cannot be done. There's no such thing as a building that works all by itself where there's no people.
Today, you're right.
But I'm not saying that the robots won't replace a lot of people. They have already, and they will continue to.
It's going to continue to go. We'll see what happens in that market. I'm excited to see the economy of tomorrow, whatever that might be.
Me too. Yeah, the second thing besides parking is loading docks. You have to have enough room for an over-the-road tractor trailer to back into the loading dock to get the product from inside the truck into the building or from inside the building into the truck. There may be one day driverless trucks. There may be forklift trucks that work without an operator. I don't think we're close to that right now.
No.
Yeah.
Now, and you've named two things that I've made both mistakes. I'm still living with no docks. It's a challenge.
No docks to me is death. I have one building with no docks. Here's the problem. Nobody wants when the tenant leaves. I very rarely have financial struggling tenants, but the one with no dock, because people who will pay less money in rent will compromise. That's a compromise. It's a major compromise, especially if there's a lot of volume of in and out of the product. So that loading maneuvering room is extremely important. And the third thing is ceiling height. If you've got a real low ceiling in a building that's 25,000 feet, you can't stack up into racks. And
16 feet at least?
Yeah, the little buildings I can live with actually 14 if they're really small. 10,000 feet with 14, because they don't really use the ceiling height. It's more floor stacking and people doing work and moving things around. But we have buildings that are 25 and 24 feet. If I have a 30,000 foot unit, it's got to be at least 18.
Yeah. I've not screwed up on height. So just because I know I always have to be 12 feet minimum, right? Yeah. That's my minimum is 12 feet just for my duct work.
How big is the space?
My space is 26,000 square feet. And I've got my boxing school is 5,500 square feet.
Okay. So our 26,000 foot building that we just bought is 18. Yeah. I have one investor who's a multi-billionaire and he called me and he said, I was told to never invest in any building that's got less than 32 feet. And I said, you're talking about Class A stuff, not Class B. The stuff we do?
Yeah.
It can get lower and lower with the smaller square footage. He said, yeah, you're right. The guy didn't say, that's for 1 million square feet or 800,000 square feet. Yeah, for that, you don't want. I actually know of a guy who drove his Ferrari into a telephone pole and died because he came to me and he said, I'm building a new building of 100,000 square feet. This was about 20 years ago. We don't need ceiling height. I don't want to waste the money. I'm going to make it 16 clear. And I said, Gordon, you got to make it 24 clear. He says, it's a waste of money. I'm going to be there forever. And he had sold his company to a very large conglomerate. And he was going to own the building and lease it to them. This new 16-foot clear, 100,000 square foot building. I said, Gordon, you can't do that. It won't have any future residual value. Nobody's going to want it. He said, Joel, my company's going to be there forever. I'm signing a 15-year lease. I said, okay. He disappeared. He built the building. It was 16 clear. And he calls me about a year and a half later. He says, where do you think I could find a lender that'll give me a loan on 100,000 square feet with 16 clear? I said, you know what, Gordon, I didn't think of that one, but the answer is nobody. So he had spent approximately $8 million on the building and he couldn't get a loan for more than 3 million. And he thought he was going to get 6 million, which would be 75% loan to value. So he had to come up with money he didn't have. He had to sell his house. He had to sell his cars. He had to tell his kids, I can't pay for college anymore, because he had to leave the cash in the building, which wasn't worth the 8 million anymore. It was worth 3 or 4 million. That's why the bank wouldn't loan him the money. I just didn't think of that when I said, idiot, 24 clear, you won't be able to borrow money. I just didn't think of it. And his wife called me and she said, I have bad news. Gordon died. I said, what happened? He drove his Ferrari into a telephone pole. I said, why? She said, he was financially desperate. He was suicidal. He thought we had lost everything, which we probably did because he didn't build the ceiling height high enough.
Yeah.
How about that's life and death?
Well, it's not worth dying over. It's just money. The government's going to keep printing money. All you got to do is figure out how to get some of it. Just play a different game. It's never worth driving your car into anything for.
It was a very sad case.
Yeah. And I promise you, the government's not going to stop printing it. They need us to get it so that we can push. They need us more than we need them.
Yeah, that's right.
So don't worry about the money too much. Just do what you love to do and it will find you. What's your playbook for off-market sourcing today? Brokers, direct owners, outreach, data, or community presence? And how do you keep that pipeline full?
It's 100% cold calling to off-market.
Cold kids. Did you hear that? 100% cold calling. Pick up the phone, smile and dial. Ask for the deal.
You want to hear something crazy? We do it door to door. We don't do it on the phone.
Do
How
you
about
set up
that?
buyers first, or do you just literally go knocking on doors asking for owners?
We have a list of who the owners are that we've established. It's in our CRM. And we go and we ask for the person. And very often they're there because the owner of the business is very often the owner of the building. We try to get in to see them. We often get thrown out. We probably get into 1 out of every 10 at the most. And we say, we'd like to buy your building. We buy all cash and we'll lease it back to you. And that's what we do.
1 in 10 is way better than picking up the phone before you get kicked out. Awesome,
You get-
Joel.
you get kicked
We're
out.
wrapping up. If somebody wanted to work with you, who would that be and how would they get in contact with you?
We are looking for long-term investors who are financial safety freaks, who like the idea of cash flow as opposed to the quick get in, get out. If we buy a great building, Ken, why would we sell it? How are we going to replace it with another better building?
Yeah.
So that's the answer is someone who believes in long-term real estate ownership, cash flow distributions, appreciation and value, and relationships where they have a level of trust of us as the shepherd or manager of the properties and of their investment.
Okay. So if I'm thinking, man, I want to get into this, am I getting into a single property LLC or am I getting into a portfolio of a bunch of different buildings?
Well, either one, because we always have people coming out and going in if we give them liquidity. We usually have 2 or 3 single tenant buildings that we're working on closing. It takes months from when we find it to get it done. So I would say when people ask me that question, you should go into 3 of our deals. So if you're putting $100,000 each, that's better than putting $300,000 into one deal.
Right.
And
then,
in addition, if someone else is looking to get out of a deal, I'd say, and maybe you should buy out a couple people so you got 5 investments with us, but no fund.
yeah. And then if I come in, can I come in with 10,000, 50,000, 100,000? Where do I need to start?
Every deal is a different minimum. The little ones have 25,000, the medium sized are 50, and the big ones are 100,000.
So if I've got 25,000 sitting on the sidelines and I want to put it into something not risky, I can come to Joel. Where do I find you at? And we'll throw that in the show notes. Joel, it comes to the time of the show where Diary of a CEO is my favorite podcast, and Steven asks all of his guests to write a question for the next guest, and I bought his cards.
I might have heard one already because I've watched you a number of times. So
This
we'll
is
see if it's a
Lewis
repeat.
Thurux. I'm probably saying that wrong. Therux. Where were you when you felt most vulnerable and why?
That's a great one. Most vulnerable, probably when I was in the hospital. Health is a big deal with pneumonia and had to take an ambulance to a bigger hospital because I think the doctor thought I was going to die on their watch. Maintaining your health is so important. And I got pneumonia in Big Sky, Montana at a destination wedding. So I think it's always your health or the health of a family member.
Yeah, I don't know when I felt the most vulnerable. I've had multiple near-death experiences in my life. Been shot, stabbed, run over by an 18-wheeler. So I don't know when I've felt the most vulnerable. I think it's when I'm looking at my daughter.
Yeah.
I think that's when I feel the most vulnerable in this planet. And if you're out there watching and you want to share with us what makes you feel the most vulnerable, what situation made you feel the most vulnerable, we'd love to hear it. Joel, thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate you.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks.